Rabbi, I am so curious. What is the question of the day?
Here is the question of the day. Dear Rabbi and Aleeza, this is from a woman named Judith. At my stage in life, widow in my 50s, many of the men that are suggested to me are divorced. When I ask them what triggered the divorce, they give me different variations of the same answer. My ex-wife was raised by Holocaust survivors, so she couldn't connect emotionally. Or my ex-wife was raised by her grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, and that messed her up emotionally. Or I need to connect emotionally, but my ex-wife, because of her upbringing, couldn't give me that. What's going on? Is this some kind of generic answer that all matchmakers advise them to use to avoid the question?
Oh, that was surprising at the end.
I know. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, not at all. First of all, I didn't even see that coming. I thought it was going to be like, they left me. And I was going to say, yeah, it's more common that if there's a divorce that the woman might leave the man, and the man's like, no, I'm okay. We could stick around and make it work. I totally thought that was the direction that you were going with this question. This whole question is not at all what I expected, and especially the end. So I've never heard that before. And maybe that's because I haven't met somebody who has consistently dated somebody who's the child of Holocaust survivors. Like I would feel like, oh, maybe you dated somebody who was like that, or somebody else, or like to have a whole slew of people that are very similar like that. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
The second piece of that is no, definitely that's not advice that I've ever heard any matchmaker give. And I've met with hundreds or maybe close to thousands of matchmakers at this point, and I've just never, ever heard that as an answer, although not a bad answer, but I mean, I've never heard it. Have you ever heard that before, Rabbi? I never heard that before.
I would say the Holocaust may have ended almost 80 years ago.
Yeah.
Yet there are so many residuals. Like, people don't talk about that openly, all the various residuals of the second. That's why today they call them second and third generation survivors. They don't call them children or grandchildren of survivors, because I'll give you an example. As a child, I was never allowed to go to a summer camp because my grandfather said no grandchild of mine will ever go to a camp.
Right. There was a program that I was going to run, and the name that we used was just too closely associated with somebody, and it was a trigger for them. I'm trying to remember. It was, I don't think it was camp, but it was something very close to that. And they're like, you can't say that. And I was like, why? It's great. It's good. It rhymes. I like rhyming things. They're like, no. You can't say that. That triggers this. And I was like, ooh. Right? Like if that's not what you grew up with, you don't know. But have you ever heard of a matchmaker giving the advice to somebody, or have you ever given the advice to somebody? Just blame it on that.
Oh, no, for sure not.
Okay.
That would be, first of all, I don't think that's definitely overstepping. Even as a coach or a counselor, that's overstepping.
Right.
How would you give, that's terrible to give that advice. But if you are a person that was raised by Holocaust survivors, then it's very possible that it's true, that what she's saying here, what Judith is saying here is true, that it's more difficult for that person to connect emotionally.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an excuse.
Well, I wonder also, and if we had her on here, I would ask her this. I would say, Judith, do you, as you're talking to them, do you say to them like, oh, were you raised by, or were they raised by Holocaust survivors? Is that, is that the reason? Because you saw it once or twice, then did you kind of like pitch that as a reason that something could be, or did they just offer it freely without you having any influence it? Because sometimes when we see something and we start to see a pattern, we just assume that there's a pattern, and then we call it out before somebody shares it with us. I'm going to guess that that's not the case, but I'm just mentioning it because we sometimes create the stories that we expect to hear because that's a pattern that we're used to hearing. But I've never heard of that before. So first of all, it's totally reasonable, plausible, and completely makes sense. The other thing that I would ask is how emotionally clearly this man is emotionally available, but how emotionally needy is he, right? Does he have a normal degree of need in a relationship, or is he somebody that's overly needy and that's going to be overwhelming for you? I'm actually curious about that.
I mean, not to dig in too much, but it could be that he didn't have a mother that was available to him, so he's looking for a mother, not a wife.
Also, but she's seeing that over and over again. So there's many different types of people out there. So then why is she seeing this pattern? Like, why does this pattern keep coming up for her in her life? Like, what's the message? What
There
is she putting
are
out in the universe to get this back?
there are certain communities throughout the world that happen to be larger communities of Holocaust survivors. For example, I live in Montreal. In Montreal, there is a huge community of Holocaust survivors. And so it's very possible that if you were dating here in Montreal in your 50s, you're probably in the Ashkenazi community, because we have a very strong Sephardic community here as well. You're probably going to be dating a child of Holocaust survivor. So it's possible that she's seeing this over and over again. And it happens to be in her echo chamber that she's seeing this.
That's a really good point. And I also visited Australia, where I did one of my live matchmaking programs. And in Melbourne, they have a huge Holocaust survivor population. And it's something that they all very much relate to. So that's another example of a community that's densely populated. And if you live there, you might hear those stories. It's a really spot on, Rabbi. That's a really good observation and a really good point. And maybe that leads us to our dating advice, which would be perhaps you need to look outside of the current community, because maybe it's too closely related and it's not what you're seeking. And therefore, maybe we should go one community or one town or one state or city away from where you're at in order to get a different population. That might be a way of pivoting and continuing to date, but in a different way.
There's an old saying: if you change your place of location, you change your mazal, you change your constellations, your luck. Mishana mako, mishana mazal. So maybe that's what the world is beckoning of you right now, Judith, to change your place and change your mazal.
Yeah. And I would reflect back on it. Like, I think everything that we're saying is like, oh, it could be this. Oh, it could be that. I mean, like, we could sit here and talk about it over and over again. If you were here with us, right, we would dig into it a little bit more. So I would just tell you to take this podcast and this conversation and use this as a springboard for digging deeper and going, wait, what's going on here? Why is the same message and the same type of a human being coming back and bouncing back to me over and over again? Is it right? We're in the same community? Oh, that's a good point. Is it that I don't know, seek people out that are emotionally unavailable because I grew up with an emotionally unavailable parent. And even though I don't want it, and even though I don't like it, it's still what's normal to me and what I grew up with. Is that why I'm doing it? Like, what is going on? And I would just encourage you to use this dialogue as a springboard for understanding what's going on here and figuring out what your next move is for dating.
I mean, the two of us definitely analyzing this, I think it's a dictionary definition of insanity. I don't mean it in a negative way. I just mean it in a like, it's very easy opportunity, because we're looking at this and saying, look, this is happening over and over and over to you, Judith. Well, this is a great opportunity for you to use this as a springboard to make a change and do something different.
Right. And it came up enough times that there's a pattern. And as soon as you see a pattern, first of all, acknowledging it and recognizing it, amazing. And then what am I going to do with that information? Do I like the pattern? Because if I do, hey, look, it's repeating anyway. I may as well follow it. Oh, I don't like the pattern. Okay. How can I change it up? What do I have to do differently? And how do I need to date differently? And what efforts can I make that will yield me a different type of result? And from that, I think you're going to figure out your answers. So I'll wrap with a blessing and say, may you find clarity in the dating process so that you can date with greater ease. And may you find somebody who is emotionally available to connect with you on the level that you desire and build a beautiful relationship with.
Amen.